Good day everyone and welcome back to another D&D 5e homebrew video. Today I'm going to be talking about a race that I actually made a while back and I am now rebalancing it because I looked back and was like, oh boy, this is not good. So anyway, a little bit of backstory. This race is essentially meant to be what happens when the essentially Lord of all demons, because my campaign doesn't actually exist using most of the proper Dungeons and Dragons lore, so it's in an entirely enclosed environment. I'll borrow gods occasionally, but that's really what I do. So anyway, this race is essentially what happens when there is a half-breed between the Lord of all demons, I guess, would be the best term for him, and generally humans, although technically it's any mortal. I call it the Tenebrinus. That was a butchering of a couple of Latin phrases. I don't remember what they were. I think it was like Dark Lord or something. Um, so it's like a half demon type thing, and it was stupid broken when I first envisioned it. It had a polymorph, it had a 24-hour charm person that was once per day after, I think it was level 3. It was just stupidly broken, so I took a recent development in my campaign to take the opportunity to change it up, as well as giving the player technically two options as to which route they could go down. Now, technically, I'm not a huge fan of lots and lots of subraces. I put two in for the Tenebrinus because it kind of depended on what the player actually decided to do, but they wouldn't know which would be the outcome of their actions. So I've got one that I've referred to as the Stabilized and the other that I've referred to as the Corrupted. Before we get into those, things that all of them share: ability score increases of strength by 2 and charisma by 1, base walking speed of 30 feet, dark vision 60 foot. That's fairly standard for most non-human races, actually. They can speak common and infernal. They both have access to the Produce Flame cantrip, and they both have resistance to fire damage. Okay, besides that, let's get into the differences. We'll start off with the Stabilized. The Stabilized gets their Produce Flame cantrip through the use of something that I've referred to as the Infernal Flame Barrow. Additionally, upon reaching level 3, they can also cast Thaumaturgy and Control Flames. Those are both cantrips, Control Flames being from the Elemental Evil player guide. So I felt like it was very thematic, so I put those in. Besides for that, their fire resistance comes from Hellish Resistance. Wait, no, Hellish Resilience, sorry. Which also makes them vulnerable to cold damage when their Blazing Aura is not active. And that brings us to their Blazing Aura, which is possibly the least balanced of their things, although I think it's fairly balanced now that I've got like the increased vulnerability to cold when it's not active and all that. So as a bonus action, they can engulf their self in flames for 1 minute, so 10 turns basically. Well, 10 rounds rather. And then during this time, any attacks that they make will deal an extra 1d4 flame damage. Additionally, while it is active, they are considered resistant to cold damage. Additionally, when they activate Blazing Aura, all creatures within 10 feet of them must make a dexterity saving throw, which is a DC of 8 plus charisma plus proficiency. And on a fail save, they take 1d8 fire damage, and then the ability cannot be used again until they complete a long rest. That's really the basics of it. So basically, they can self-combust without hurting themselves, but they can hurt basically everyone around them, including allies. And then after that, for the next 10 turns, they get an extra d4 on any attacks they make. I should probably make that with weapons, or at least clarify, because getting that extra bonus on like a spell doesn't really make all that much sense, but at the same time it might. Okay, so beyond that, there is the Corrupted variant, which is fairly much the same as I had previously stated, obviously. Main differences is they get the Produce Flame cantrip from Infernal Deceiver, and with Infernal Deceiver they can cast Charm Person once per day, well, once per long rest, using Charisma as their spellcasting modifier. I believe that Charm Person by default only lasts for an hour. I'd have to double check that. That might not actually be balanced now that I think about it. They also have resistance to necrotic damage on top of their fire resistance. However, they are vulnerable to radiant damage. They have this trait called Sustained, where they do not need to sleep. However, to be able to sustain themselves without sleep, they need to consume the soul of a humanoid every day. Otherwise, they gain 1 level of exhaustion. While we're on the topic of consuming a soul, they have this thing called soul consumption, which basically gives them the ability to spend 10 minutes to consume the soul of a humanoid creature that has died within the last minute. For the purposes of this, it includes goblinoids, but it will not include standard undead, simply because undead technically have no soul. This counts towards the soul that is needed to be consumed to sustain themselves. Additionally, when they consume something, they will heal for 1d4 hit points. However, they can consume a maximum of 4 souls per day, so I'm putting a limit on how much healing they can get from it. And then finally we get to Soul Fray, which might actually be giving them too much, but at the same time I like the idea of them having a combat ability, especially because they're technically the more aggressive of the two variants. So Soul Fray, as a bonus action, they can ignite one of their hands in like this flaming blue energy type thing. That's kind of meant to be sort of reminiscent of what I depict souls as in my campaign. So for the duration, while it's active, which is for 30 seconds, so 5 turns, they are considered proficient with unarmed strikes and deal 1d6 necrotic damage with their punches. Then when they successfully attack a creature with an unarmed strike for this duration, the creature must make a Constitution saving throw, which is DC 8 plus Charisma Charisma modifier plus proficiency, obviously, or have their hit point maximum reduced by half the damage dealt. 1 damage will cause an aura reduction, and the reduction lasts for a minute. Obviously, this can only be used like once per long rest. So that's really all I have to discuss about these. I figured I'd share, there's probably a link to where I've listed them somewhere in the description. Thanks for tuning in, I guess. If you enjoyed, then sweet, leave a thumbs up. If you want to stay tuned for more D&D content, then subscribe, I guess, and I'll see you next time. Cheers, bye.